Hey everyone, welcome back to Maple Syrup Tech. Today we're going to be doing another PC build. Now this build is going to be what in my opinion is the best way to start an upgradable PC build in early 2019. Now what do I mean by upgradable? Well, basically it will be centered around mostly new parts and focus on getting a functional budget computer, however with the ability to upgrade it down the line. So let's start by taking a look at the parts I've selected, and we will discuss why they were chosen after we get through the list. Let's start with the CPU. I've selected an AMD Athlon 200GE, a 2-core 4-thread budget part I picked up for only $55 on Newegg. To pair with it, I chose a Gigabyte AB350 Gaming ATX motherboard. I picked up this one for sale for $65 at Canada Computers. For the memory, I went with an 8GB kit of Crucial Ballistics DDR4 3000 MHz memory. I bought this off of Amazon for $65. Powering the build, I chose an EVGA 750BQ, which is a semi-modular 80 plus bronze PSU. I got it on sale for $50, once again from Canada Computers. For storage, I'm going with a single 240GB SSD, which is an ADATA SU650. It cost $40, once again from Newegg. Last on the basic parts list is the EVGA DG73, a case which I got once again from Canada Computers for an amazing $40 on sale. Now for the optional parts. The only used part that I used is a 2GB RX 560 from Gigabyte that I got off of eBay for only $70. This is the only optional part that will affect the performance in a significant way. After that, I went on the aesthetic side with a Deepcool RF120 3-fan kit for a little price of only $30 from Canada Computers. And to end our optional for a little better look on the cooler, I used the Ryzen Stealth Cooler from my Ryzen 3 1200, so no real cost there in my case. You could easily swap this out for a budget CPU cooler worth between $10 and $15. Welcome. Now, there's going to be a little more than usual to talk about for the parts selection, and for some of these parts, the parts I chose are actually just examples of what you should be looking for and not necessarily the exact part you need. First of all, I chose the AM4 platform for a very simple reason. AMD guaranteed socket compatibility till 2020. Meaning that for the frame of your system, you will most likely be good for at least another 1 to 2 more generations of parts above and beyond what's already available on the market out there. Secondly, the general idea when building a PC that you plan on upgrading down the line is that there are some parts you're going to want to make sure are already optimized for your build and you won't have to swap out. The 2 reasons you don't want to swap out those parts is either number 1, the part in question is very difficult to swap out because it's central to your system, and number 2, because of the nature of the part, it loses a lot of resale value at the moment that you're actually upgrading it. So, number 1 on the list is our motherboard. So it meets both criteria. Number 1, everything's connected to your motherboard and swapping it out is really not easy. And secondly, the resale value for motherboards isn't that great, especially if you're not bundling it with a CPU. For this build in particular, you're going to make sure that you go with a Gigabyte or MSI motherboard, because even though it shouldn't, the Athlon processor is unlocked with the latest BIOS revisions and can be overclocked with any other Ryzen CPU, as long as you're going with an MSI or a Gigabyte motherboard for the moment. Now, second on the list of parts you don't want to have to swap out is the power supply. And this is really because of the resale value. A used power supply uses a lot of value, and the price difference between an entry-level PSU and one that will be sufficient for your future upgrades is very minor, meaning it won't affect a lot the overall price of your build. Now, I went with an EVGA 750BQ. But any reliable brand name PSU between 650 and 750 watts will most likely be enough to handle any single GPU setup that you want to go with. And so just pick whatever's on sale and offering the best value at the moment you're making your shopping around for your build. Lastly is the case, and this once again meets both criteria. It's very difficult to swap out the case once you've done all your cable management, and secondly, a case will lose a lot of value because with every minor scratch or ding, since we're talking about aesthetics, the case will lose most of its value. Where you're going to want to save money by going budget in the beginning is with the CPU and the GPU and even the storage. For the exact opposite reason, these parts resell really well as long as you're not overpaying for them when you buy them, and they're easily swappable, and also the price difference between the budget and the high end is most significant for these parts. So it'll have a bigger overall impact on the total budget of your build. Now, we waited long enough, let's take a look at the final product. So we have our PC. Now if you remember, I mentioned that the GPU was optional in this build. That's because the 200G actually is an APU, meaning it has integrated graphics and can actually run without a dedicated graphics card. While not a powerhouse, it still leagues beyond what was available before this year in terms of integrated graphics. That means you can have an up and running computer for as little as $315 with all new parts, and one that is actually ready to be upgraded as soon as you're able to, well, reinvest down the road. So, performance-wise, you can play most of the popular esports titles without having to add a GPU to the build. For example, I was running League of Legends at 1080p at the highest settings and getting an average FPS of 90. Now, for Fortnite, if I limited my resolution to 720p, and by using the lowest settings, however still maintaining epic view distance, I was hitting 80 FPS. And in Overwatch, once again at 720p and the lowest settings, I was at around 65 FPS, so still very playable. And lastly, I ran Firestrike, and a score of 1329 is pretty dismal, but if you notice, it's really the graphics score that's holding us back, being slightly above 1400, while the physics score is clearly above 6000. So that leads us to our first suggested upgrade, a dedicated GPU. So if your budget permits, or first on your upgrade list should be to buy an entry-level GPU. And this is the only part for the moment that I seriously recommend going used. Because with the NVIDIA 10 series and the AMD RX 400 and 500 series being sold for as cheap as they are on the used market, it's really hard to recommend going new for these parts. I paired it with an RX 560, which at only $75 brings this to a whole other level of gaming build, and we're still under $400 at around $385 actually. And if we look at the performance, now we're going to do it in reverse and start with the Firestrike. We jump from 1329 to 5221, with a graphics score now above 6000 to match our physics score. Not too shabby. For Fortnite, at 1080p now, however, but still with the lowest settings and epic view distance, which is what is recommended for competitive play anyway, we have an average FPS of 142. That's really a huge jump, and at 1080p this time. Overwatch on high settings and is now at 90 FPS at 1080p as well. I didn't bother re-benchmarking exactly League because we were above 200 FPS. And once you get to that high of an FPS, the validity is really lost. So with the RX 560, you can really play any AAA title as long as you adjust the settings and temper your expectations. Without the graphics card and just using the APU, I would not expect to run smoothly on very demanding titles of the last year or two. So that's why the GPU should be first on your upgrade list. After that, the coolers and the fans on my build list were really just for aesthetics. But for some people, that's half the fun of building a custom PC. And for around $30, I find it adds quite a bit of flair to the build. So the last thing we have left to talk about are what should be your future upgrades once you're past the GPU. Well, in my opinion, storage should come next, because a 240 gigabyte SSD will be enough to get you started, but I would easily add a 1 to 3 terabyte HDD as soon as possible so that you don't have to start uninstalling games and reinstalling games too frequently. After that, when your budget allows, down the road, you swap that 200 GE for an R5 or something better down the road. And you can even swap that RX 560 if it was your budget part for a 1070. And honestly, at that point with this build, you'll be in gaming heaven at 1080p. You'll be in a perfect sweet spot. So guys, like this starter build for early 2019. And please don't forget to drop a like and a subscribe if you aren't subscribed already. It really helps the channel a lot. And I hope to hit the 1,000 subscribers very soon, so we'll be able to up the level of our builds and up the level of our content. So I hope I see you guys in my next video.